so I have some creative experience that was with me earlier, and then working with AI, opened the doors for tech.
You being in a competitor, company, to us becoming friends, and now you coming to this podcast, I think we've come a long way.
A lot of people are getting distracted, I feel, by the newest toy, by the newest kid on the block. And if only they can put a bit more thought into it, I think we can do wonders.
Someone is just starting out. What is that one advice that you'd like to give them for them to have like a career trajectory like you did? Thanks a lot, Jay, for taking the time out. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Anupreet.
From being on panels with you a bunch of times to you being in a competitor, company, to us becoming friends, and now you coming to this podcast. I think we've come a long way.
Of course.
Thank you so much for coming over. I would love to have you introduce yourself. I know you've had a decade-long career. I'll probably not be able to do justice to that. So if you can introduce yourself and then, talk to us about how you reached where you reached, it'll be very interesting.
So, hi, my name is Jay Morzaria. I've been working as a creative professional for the last 10 years in the advertising industry, the Indian advertising industry. And I've worked across a bunch of brands, a bunch of agencies, worked with an AI company, last Rephrase.ai, which is Gan.AI's competitor, as Anupreet just mentioned. And I am currently on a break, but let's see where life takes me next.
Awesome. Where would you want life to take you next? What is your ideal, next stop, having seen such vividness in your career?
After working in a very different sort of a space with Rephrase, which was AI and all of that, I have some creative experience that was with me earlier, and then working with AI, opened the doors for tech for me. And not only in terms of personalization, which Rephrase did, but I also was speaking at Google and everywhere, where I met a lot of other people, using AI in very vivid ways. So I see a good combination of creative plus tech happening in the future, and I would want to be somewhere in that space.
Interesting. Very exciting. And like creatively, I think the way you've moved up the ladders, I think, most people do not see that kind of career trajectory. If someone is just starting out, what is that one advice that you'd like to give them for them to have like a career trajectory like you did?
See, my life largely has been a roller coaster, and I don't recommend that for everyone. If you see, I've been flip-flopping here and there across agencies and all of that. And my intent behind doing what I did was very different than, today's scenario at this point of time. The only thing that I would say to anyone who's starting out is that just follow the ABCs of life. And for me, ABCs always be creative. So it's not only in your profession, but also in terms of your life, the decisions you make. Sometimes, we always try to solve problems in a very logical manner, but when you apply creative logic to things, that's when magic happens. So that's what I have tried to do, and life has worked out pretty fine for me so far. And I'm sitting on your podcast, so I guess I'm doing well.
Thank you so much for being so humble about it. I think ABC for me is always be closing. And you touched upon a very interesting point. So when I say always be closing, I actually mean that whenever I'm having any conversation, it could even be when I was a kid, my conversation with my dad about getting an approval to go to Goa. I'm selling him that idea of, allowing me to go to Goa.
Correct.
For you, when that ABC is always be creative, like how do you apply that to your personal life?
Yeah, so if you take the same Goa example, right? If you just go straight up to your dad and say, listen, I want to go to Goa, can I go to Goa? It's not going to be a very, straight yes from him. But if you apply an emotional layer to it, is when he'll buy that entire thing. And that's what, that's the difference between sales and marketing, as has been said. Like, there was this one beautiful ad, I remember. There's a guy standing with a placard in the middle of a road, a deserted road, and it says to Jacksonville. Right? And he's asking for a lift. And that is sales. And on the other side, there was, two moms for Christmas. And that's marketing. So that's how I think of applying creative logic to every situation in life.
Interesting. Very cool. What do you do when you're not thinking creatively for brands? What do you do outside of that?
Outside of that, I like writing. So I keep writing, like that's one thing. I'm currently reading a book called The 5 Resets by Aditi Nerurkar. She she appeared on a podcast which I follow, the Diary of a CEO. So she talks about how to deal with stress and all of that and everything. So I'm just reading that book. It's a very interesting read. I think it applies a lot to the modern scenario that we have, where we are all doom scrolling. We're doing kind of funny things. Apart from that, I've just started learning singing. I'm starting.
Oh, wow.
I'm learning Indian classical vocals. Don't ask me to sing. I'm still learning. सारेगामा पता नहीं ऐसा चल रहा है मेरा अब तक. तो
Wow.
let's see how that goes.
I mean, I don't know a second person who's learning Saregama at this phase of their life. Very inspiring, actually. Like, I can't think of attempting to learn something very new in a classroom where everyone else would be less than 12 years old.
Yeah.
It's
No, so actually for me, I've had a funny journey with music. So I used to be a tabla player when I was small, and what happened is my parents really got worried that मैं तबला ही बजाता रह जाऊंगा, पढ़ाई वढ़ाई कुछ करूंगा नहीं. So then एक दिन उन्होंने छुपा दिया तबला, and वो ट्रॉमा मेरे पास रह गया कि अरे मेरा म्यूजिक मुझसे छीन लिया इन लोगों ने. And then, of course, I mean, it's very easy to relegate all the plans to retirement and all of that and everything. But I think after pandemic and after the recent years that we have all collectively been through, I've realized that there's no point relegating everything to retirement, and maybe you should start some things now.
Yeah, makes sense.
And you get to, and anyway, like learning music is a big long-term commitment. It takes forever. People who are ustad also don't claim to know all of it.
Correct.
It's a deep ocean you take a dive into. So that's the effort. Let's see how much if I can extract a few drops.
That's wonderful. I always look up to people who are doing some things outside of their work. I was just telling this on another episode that, your corporate life just sucks in as much as you give it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to disconnect at some point and the rest of these hours are for something else. Only then will you be able to, do justice.
Yeah, and I look at it like so I don't look at work and life in a separate manner. I look at it in like one unit, because it's one person living the same life. No, it's not like there's some other Jay going at work and there's some Jay at home. There's no like that. It's one person, right? So only when this one person will, put some charging into his system in form of whatever is a relaxing mechanism. Maybe it's music, maybe it's meditation, spirituality, whatever works for you. Right? If that is what you put into yourself, that is the investment you make into yourself, I think that is when you can appear fresh the next day for work, and you can bring in a certain sort of energy. Otherwise, we all know how Monday mornings tend to be. So
so when you entered the AI world, right, and this is very interesting for someone like me to learn. So I came from tech to the creative side of things. Like I've never done brand or consumer behavior understanding before I joined Gan. For me, it was all about tech all this while. Now suddenly I'm thinking about the next big campaign for the likes of Cadbury and Coca-Cola. That's a big cultural shift for me to even learn how agencies operate and how brands operate.
Yeah.
Is a very, very fresh world for me to learn from the very scratch. I was telling Neeraj on my episode with him the other day that the fact that I didn't even know the difference between what a creative agency versus a media agency is shows how naive I was before I entered this space. When you entered the AI space, how big of a shock was working for a tech company versus an agency? How big of a cultural shock was that for you?
So it wasn't much of a shock, to be very honest. And see that the entire thing, the reason why it wasn't a shock is because the process was quite smoothened over for me, in the sense that Ashray, who was the founder of Rephrase.ai, we were constantly in touch even before I formally joined Rephrase. So I have been talking with him here and there. The only thing where I had to have like a learning curve after I joined Rephrase is, understanding the terminology of how tech people talk, and because we had these lovely calls where we view, any updates to the platform or any new updates that were just coming to the personalization tech we had were discussed on those calls. And tech people, being tech people, they use all these technical, ye prod mein hai, ye dev mein hai. I did not understand any of it. So we had a lovely woman called Sahana. So I used to bug her a lot. Sahana, iska matlab kya hai? Iska matlab kya hai? That's how I just learned some things. I googled and all of that, and I kind of picked up. And without sounding arrogant or anything, I think that, see, that's the beauty of any agency person, not only me, but any agency people, because the way we work in the agency culture, agency side of things, right? Now, you are dealing with a lot of agencies yourself at this point of time. But if you think from an agency person's POV, right, they are dealing with so many people. They are dealing with, normal production houses who produce ad films. They are dealing with directors. They are dealing with actors. They are dealing with, tech partners like Gan, Rephrase, whatever. They are dealing with all kinds of people to serve one brand at any given point of time. So they are very adaptable. Generally, it's easy for them to adapt to any sort of challenge and all of that. So it was easy for me to adapt to Rephrase, I would say, and to adapt to the world of AI, so to speak. The learning curve also came in the fact that I think AI is progressing quite, at quite a decent space. Before the world adapts to it is, the AI moves by leaps and bounds.
Absolutely.
So I think, keeping yourself updated every day was quite a challenge, and it still is. I mean, I try to read up on, now there's this new tool called Sora, which has come into picture and all of that. So I'm just trying to understand what is happening. It's quite a fascinating time to be alive, and I'm just having fun.
Yeah, I call it a whole new industrial revolution, with AI being the industry this time, and I think it's going to impact every single business vertical out there. But like talking specifically about video personalization, because I think you've done quite a few personalized campaigns yourself.
Yeah.
How do you think it's changing the way marketers are thinking about their video creatives? Is it important to call people by their name in a video campaign? Have you seen any net ROI impact of the campaigns that you've seen closely? And do you think it is the new normal where generic ads are probably going to be like a thing of the past, and ads will become a lot more personalized, just like the Facebooks and the Instagrams display ads have become a lot more personalized to the person who is viewing it, right? So based on your search history, etc., etc. Now it's just normal for more targeted. The targeting was a thing that was solved back in I think 13, 14 by Facebook and Instagram. If I see an ad of something that is absolutely irrelevant, I'll probably be looking at that ad and I'll be like, why are you not using basic targeting functionalities? Similar to that, like, do you think in a few years, if I see an ad that does not say my name, or if I see an ad that talks about, let's say, vegetarian food while I'm a hardcore non-vegetarian, or non-vegetarian food when I'm a vegan, will it surprise consumers because of the fact that creating hyper-personalized video ads is becoming so easy that the expectation from brands would be to take the effort and use these tools versus show me something absolutely generic? Do you think that you're moving towards that future, working in that industry very closely?
I think what consumers appreciate, and from what I have understood of this, Anupreet, is when there's a layer of an idea on top of personalization. Just personalization for the sake of it is something that I don't think consumers appreciate as much. But when there's an idea which topples, so to give an example, which we Rephrase people always keep talking about, which is the Cadbury example, because we are just immensely proud of it. But if you see the Ogilvy team and the Mondelez team and everyone involved, they came up with a central idea, which was, the thought was to help people, your normal retailers who did not have a good time because of the pandemic, and to make their Diwali beautiful. That was the thought. When that thought combined with the technology that Rephrase offered, when that collaboration happened, is when magic happened. What I see these days is that, yes, personalization has become important. I won't deny that. I think it is the way forward, and we will see a lot more personalization going forward. And perhaps generic ads would be a thing of the past. But whether these hyper-personalized ads are, they have a central idea which evokes some sort of sentiment, some sort of emotion, I think brands will have to look, very deeply into that. It cannot just be, as you said, I mean, one is that you are a non-vegetarian and I am serving you an ad for vegetarianism. Now, it could be that I am trying to influence you to convert to the other side. But now, how am I doing that? If I'm just giving a generic message, hey Anupreet, तुमने इतना non-veg खाया, अब तुमने दुनिया इतनी बर्बाद कर दी, अगर मैं ऐसा बोलूँ तो it might just turn you off. But if I give a more emotional argument rather than just spitting out facts, you might be inclined to try it for one day, then 1 week, then maybe I'll convert you over a long period of time. So
got it.
Yeah.
serving advertisers and creative heads and brand marketers in the era when there was very limited technology, I would say, especially like AI was not a thing. What is the stark difference that you see in that world versus now? I think we were talking about before the podcast started a little bit about how the recall value of an advertisement, was a lot more 5 years back or 20 years back.
Yeah.
Have you seen that shift, and do you think you attribute some of that shift to the technology advancements that have happened?
See, you can never blame technology for anything. If we just, kind of zoom out, and this is also to, and I have been getting asked this question a lot, will AI take your job and all of that? I feel that that's not the case. And if it is going to take jobs, it will create jobs also. We have seen throughout history that AI has, any piece of technology has done better, in a net some sort of a manner, if not in a short term, maybe in a long term, perspective of things. And if we see, the purpose of science has always been to serve humanity. Without humanity, there would be no need for science, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's technology, whether it's medicines, now to say that, listen, I have got an illness, and maybe taking a medicine will temporarily help me, but I am responsible for my long-term health, right?
Yep.
That's the case with brands also these days. What I feel is that there's too much distraction with every new toy that comes around, but there are some basic fundamentals on which marketing operates, on which everything, like you have certain sort of emotions there, you have certain kind of reactions that you will get with people when you craft a good ad, and you have to just figure out the right way to do it. That's the simplest thing ever. So what I've seen is, and you are working in AI, I am working in AI. Let's be honest, don't you sometimes feel that people on the brand side of things overestimate what AI can do? Like they think, ये तो AI से हो जाएगा, नहीं होगा साहब, इतना आसान भी नहीं होता है. So I think that is also, and being in the field itself, when I entered Rephrase and all of that and everything, I realized that AI has a lot of power and a lot of potential, and that definitely needs to be harnessed. At the same time, to write off things where, like for example, making videos. Now we used to use a combination of tools. We would use Rephrase ka khud ka personalization platform, Rephrase Studio, that was. We would use Runway ML and some other tools as well. But at the end, we had to join all these things up to make sense of it.
Yeah.
So that is where I think brands need to focus on that. What is the story you want to tell? Then what part can be figured by AI and not by AI can be, correct after.
What is your favorite campaign? Maybe if you were a part of it, nothing like it, because I would ask you to break it down for me. But if not, I know just as a consumer, you must be like trying to think through what went behind building that campaign. Is there a campaign that you've kind of grown with, and is something that everyone can learn from? Can you break that campaign down for me?
So I love to take this example. I would always talk about Fevicol as an example. I think they have consistently been very, very good with their advertising over the years. And if you see, right, Fevicol has a brilliant strategy in place. They were a monopoly product right when they entered the market. They became a monopoly very, very soon in their growth curve, because there were not many competitors back then that they had in terms of adhesives. Once they became a monopoly, they figured, listen, we want people to just remember us. The top of mind recall has to be strong, is what they figured. So if you see over time, the kind of advertising that they've done is not only, so if you think about it very, very rationally and very, very logically, their target audience would be carpenters who are using Fevicol a lot.
Yes, there are micro influencers for them.
They are micro influencers for them. But that is where they, applied creative logic on top of things. The Fevicol ads don't only appeal to carpenters, they also appeal to you, to me, and to everyone in this room, right? And why do you think they are doing that? Because although they appeal to carpenters also, because the stories are very rooted and very grounded in nature. They are very, hinterland India stories. But they figured out that, listen, if we appeal to the larger audience also, a homeowner will tell the carpenter tomorrow, कि listen, भाई Fevicol use करो, ताकि मेरा furniture अच्छा रहे, या फिर मेरा furniture जल्दी टूटे वूटे ना.
Yeah.
So that is the logic they applied, and that's why the kind of advertising you see is fantabulous every time they come up with something. I was lucky to be a part of doing some advertising on the digital side for them when I was working at Shebang. And I think one memorable campaign that I remember that we did was a social distancing experiment we did for Fevicol. It was just another team member in Shebang. She came. Her name is Ria Arora. She came and she said कि यार ये लोग सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग फॉलो नहीं कर रहे, मास्क नहीं पहन रहे, अब फेविकॉल है ना, आप चिपका दो उन लोगों को बस, अगर ऐसा कुछ करे तो. And while it was a rough thought that she threw at us at the Fevicol team, we kind of got a little tickled by it, saying that, Fevicol, which is genuinely used to bond things, to separate people, interesting space. And then the team came up with a fantastic idea where they said, listen, what if we, so alternate tables, 50% capacity pe ek point of time pe things were working. So in a food court, only 50% tables could be occupied. In a theater, only 50% seats could be occupied. And we noticed that this whole social distancing was not being followed in food courts, especially at malls, because people वो लाल सेलोटेप मार के रखते थे पर लोग डब्बा डाल के बैठ जाते थे वहाँ पे. So we said कि what if, to sit on a chair and a table, you have to pull the chair from under the table and sit on it. But what if you can't pull the chair only because the chair is stuck by Fevicol? And that social experiment really, went berserk in no time. And I think the message was conveyed. And I think it was also historic for Fevicol because this is the very first time that Fevicol took such a public stand that, listen, this is wrong. And they called out certain behavior, but in a very cheeky, Fevicol, humorous way, where no one took offense, but they all accepted the message, with their hearts wide open.
Beautiful. Break that down a little more for me. I just want to go deeper into problems that you might have faced. And this is for someone who's just starting out, right? To pull off something at the scale of food courts from the desk of your office at Shebang. What are the problems that you face in the journey, right? I mean, and how do you solve for them, and how do you manage the deadlines, because it's relevant for a point, right? After that, it won't be relevant, that campaign. So what are the pitfalls that usually someone would fall into? And you can talk in the context of this ad as well.
No, so in terms of this ad, the challenges were plenty, I'll say, because what was happening was that 50% capacity pay when things were opened, right? The infection rate started growing suddenly. And then there was whole news that, we'll have lockdown imposed again if, the then CM, Mr. Uddhav Thackeray said that we'll have to impose lockdowns again. And that's when we said कि यार ये lockdown लग जाएगा, campaign रख जाएगा हमारा, कुछ करते हैं. And I must appreciate, salute to the entire Fevicol marketing team, everyone, Parth, Vivek, Vijay, these were the, brand side people, and Vivek being the CMO at that time. And they supported us with this vision right from the beginning. The challenges were it was a race against time. The only thing being that, one, when you think of a social experiment, you assume that it will work because everything is on paper till you actually go on ground, right? So I'll be honest enough to say that we had to keep certain backup actors also on the set. कि in case, let's say, experiment नहीं चला तो shoot कुछ तो करना पड़ेगा. And it's not only us. You will see some social experiments where you can blatantly see the acting and everything. However, I'm proud to say that, we used none of them because the experiment just worked organically. Awesome. We did very, guerrilla style of shooting where we had hidden cameras behind bags, behind, in purse ke andar chhed karke camera ghusaya. All those things we had done, and it worked beautifully well for us. The second thing, so that was one challenge, that, thinking something on paper versus translating it in reality, that will it happen, not happen? It was a question mark. And this was the first time that even I was doing a social experiment. And earlier in my career, I have never done a social experiment. So I also was a little nervous on that particular front. The second challenge was getting the mall. So what happened is we approached a few malls here and there. But they were like, नहीं, अगर आप यहाँ पे shoot करोगे तो लोगों को लगेगा कि हमारे mall में, people are not following rules and, we'll get into trouble. So I called up, and that is where I think, someone starting out also, I think relationships play a very big role in this career. Today I'm sitting because we have a relationship, and, we were competitors technically, but, it's just we have a mutual respect for each other, and we are sitting right now. So even with my clients, I've always tried to maintain a friendly relationship. So at one of the workplaces where I used to work, there was a mall client which we had, Seawoods Grand Central Mall. I'll say his name, Sagar Tanna, a beautiful person again. So I was handling the social media when I was a junior copywriter over there. and I just called up Sagar and बोला सर आपका मॉल चाहिए था शूट करने के लिए. Like क्या शूट करना है बेटा? मतलब ये ऐसा फेविकॉल का एक्सपेरिमेंट है, ये है वो है. मेरा मॉल का नाम खराब नहीं होगा ना? मतलब नहीं सर कुछ नहीं होगा, आप टेंशन मत लो. Like तो आजा शूट कर ले. And it's just happened that.
Was it pro bono? Like, did you pay them something?
No, of course. I mean, we gave them a basic fee for shooting, or like to rent out that premises for that particular duration.
Yeah.
But the very fact that it just took 5 minutes of convincing, because earlier we were trying to find other malls also, but everyone was like, नहीं सब लोग को ऐसा लगेगा ये. But for him to also take that risk कि हाँ भाई मेरे मॉल का नाम खराब नहीं होगा, and they are still shooting an experiment which talks about a general behavioral pattern and not about a particular place in general.
Correct.
So yeah, I think that was brave on his part also. And Seawood's Grand Central Mall proudly shared that experiment also, saying that this was shot at Seawood's Grand Central, and we would like people to follow this social distancing. So yeah.
I think one other thing I wanted to touch upon was how the shift has happened from traditional advertisements to new age advertisements. You've seen it all, in a decade, right? What do you miss the most? And what were the things that they were doing right, which can still be implemented, but people have forgotten in today's new age marketing?
I would say that there are some people who are still doing those things. There are two primary things that I miss: thought and craft. These are two things I miss badly, because क्या हो जाता है ना, in the rush of things, or adapting to the new toy. Now the conversation has become more like, अच्छा AI आया नया, कुछ AI के साथ कर लो. अरे पर AI के साथ क्यों करना है? Like is it adding value to your brand ultimately? Is it moving the needle? When there's an idea supporting it, बेशक AI use करो, जो use करना है करो साहब. But and it is happening till date also. And I'll give you an example. अभी election season आ रहा है, तो I'll give you a political example only. And this is without getting into any support for any particular party or whatever and everything. But if you think about the 2014 elections, when the current Prime Minister got elected, they had a very good strategy because of which they won. So if you see, the campaign was nicely divided into 3 parts. The first part was where they were, first was that we will destroy the opposition and we will completely, make sure that they are wiped out of competition.
Correct.
And for that, the first phase was called Janta Maaf Nahi Karegi. So those were the ads that ran.
Yep.
Which made a very clear impression to you that अच्छा इन लोग ने ये scam किए हैं, ये किया है, वो किया, whatever. And जिसकी वजह से जनता माफ तुम्हें नहीं करेगी. अच्छा अब जनता माफ नहीं करेगी तो जनता करेगी क्या? So that is when the second stage of the campaign came in, which was about inducing hope, which translated into अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं. ठीक है. Then the third phase was where the product-based placement happened, where they said, "Ab ki baar Modi Sarkar," which is the third
solution.
The solution part of it.
Right? Problem ये.
So problem, hope, and solution. Solution क्या है? अब की बार मोदी सरकार. And अगर मैं आपको बोलूँगा, Anupreet, I love you 3000. Does that line mean anything to you? Does it evoke a sentiment for you? You are not a Marvel fan, it seems.
Yeah.
But anyone else knows I love you 3000. देखो है लोग यहाँ पे. तो I love you 3000 is this whole Marvel thing. Iron Man ने कहा था ये चीज़. So it has some sort of emotional value to it. वैसे ही अब की बार मोदी सरकार as a line had an emotional value. Why? Because आप अगर अपने मम्मी पापा से पूछेंगे या फिर अपने दादा दादी से पूछेंगे, तो जब अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी, who turned out to be a very powerful prime minister and was responsible for building India's nuclear arsenal, जब उनका कैंपेनिंग हो रहा था, तो तब there was a slogan that was coined, which was अब की बारी अटल बिहारी. So अब की बार मोदी सरकार had that connotation also for people, that mentally they were kind of positioning that we are giving you an equally powerful candidate this time around.
Got it.
So that is where thought and craft comes in. And look at the results, landslide victory. Of course, you cannot say that only advertising did that. There was candidate, there was the kind of orator he is and all of that, but it added to it and it contributed to the win. So that is the kind of thing. And I am quite fascinated by political advertising specifically. क्योंकि क्या होता है ना, ब्रांड के लिए जब आप एडवर्टाइजिंग करते हो तब बहुत सब्जेक्टिव होती चीज़ें है कि हमारी रीच बढ़ गई पर सेल्स कम हो गया, हमारे सेल्स बढ़ गए पर रीच नहीं हुई. यहाँ पे या तो आपका कैंडिडेट जीतेगा या तो हारेगा. देयर इज नो सब्जेक्टिविटी इन दिस. सो व्हेन political examples, advertising example होते, in fact even the Congress party for example, if you see their campaign, 2004 में जब वो लोग जीते थे, odds were stacked up against them. They had, उस वक्त क्या था, their candidate was Manmohan Singh, and सामने थे बीजेपी में अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी, who had built this whole legacy around him. Now to anyone, if you ask in this room कौन जीतेगा, तो a lot of people will say यार अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी. But surprisingly in 2004 Congress won, and that was through a campaign which is, Congress ka haath aam aadmi ke saath. And the hand was their, voting symbol.
Yeah.
So that's how, they have beautifully built out campaigns over time.
Yeah.
And in terms of brands, if you see, campaigns which have lasted longer than time, Cadbury dekh lo, Asian Paints dekh lo, Fevicol dekh lo, all the brands that Piyush Pandey has handled basically.
Yeah.
And other brands also. In recent times, I'll give you one of my favorite examples is Jaqua lighting ke liye.
Yeah. Beautiful ad.
किया था. So you associate Jaqua with bathroom, bathroom equipment and all of that.
Yeah.
They had done these ads where meeting room में वो लोग shower आ रही है हो रहा है and everything. नहीं ये lighting लग रही है.
Yeah.
Very beautifully done ads.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a lot of scope when you still to do some amazing stuff. It's still happening. I am giving you examples of recent times also and of times that have gone by. It's just that a lot of people are getting distracted, I feel, by the newest toy, by the newest kid on the block. And if only they can put a bit more thought into it, I think we can do wonders. And I'm very optimistic of that change happening in the near future. Right now, I think we are going through a transition phase where there's a lot of things that are coming in, going out, and all of that. Once this transition phase is over, as we call it in financial language, consolidation ho raha hai filhal. Once this phase is done, I think the future is only looking bright.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for taking us through that nostalgia, and thank you so much for coming on this show.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate your time, and it was a lovely conversation, with you, Jay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anupreet.
Thanks.
Chalo.